On This Week in Enterprise Tech, we talk not only about ransomware and how insurance is actually affecting it, but Curtis also gets us into the discussion about the differences between automated and autonomous solutions. Plus, Curtis, Heather, and I talk with a great guest, Sachin Gupta, Senior Vice President of Enterprise Networking at Cisco, about intent-based networking and Wi-Fi 6. Twy on the set.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Twy at This Week in Enterprise Tech, episode 358, recorded September 6, 2019. Hack and Jack. This episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by Command Line Heroes, the original podcast from Red Hat. It's back for its third season, and this time it's all about the epic history of programming languages. Episode 6 recounts the origins and evolution of the Bash shell. Go to redhat.com/heroes or listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And by Worldwide Technology. Worldwide Technology's Advanced Technology Center is like no other testing and research lab with more than $500 million of equipment, including OEMs like Dell EMC, and it's virtual, so you can access it 24/7. To learn more and get insights into all that it offers, go to www.com/twit. Welcome to Twy at This Week in Enterprise Tech, the show that is dedicated to you, the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and that geek who just wants to know how this world is connected. I'm your host, Louis Maresca, your guide through this big, giant world of the enterprise, but I definitely can't guide you by myself. I need to bring in the experts, starting with our very own Mr. Curtis Franklin, senior editor at Dark Reading. Curtis, it looks like you made it through the storms. How are things going down there in the swamp there?
Well, here in the swamp, we came through in great shape. We are very grateful, very happy that we made it through. We're thinking a lot about the people who were not so fortunate, both in the Bahamas and now up in the Carolinas. We hope that there will be more good news than bad news coming from both of those places. But here in the swamp, it ended up being a great trial run for all of our hurricane preparations, and now it's warm and sunny, and we're just back to watching the storms forming on the other side of the Atlantic.
Got it. Well, thanks, Curtis, for being here. Well, let's bring in our next co-host in crime with a very familiar face. She's actually in studio. Our very own Mrs. Heather Williams, Manager and Solutions Engineer Team at Ruckus Mo. Welcome back. It's always great to have you here. Now, you're live in studio. What brings you to the Bay Area?
Oh, my day job brought me out to the West Coast. It's been great and enjoying the weather. But like Curtis, we've been doing preparations for dealing with Dorian. So one of my other day jobs is with ITDRC, and so we have been pre-positioning in Atlanta. And so I've been monitoring all of that remotely from out here, but we're getting ready to start responding already into the Carolinas.
Makes sense. Well, hopefully things go well there. Well, folks, we do have quite a busy show for you today. Not only are we talking about ransomware and the effects of insurance on it, but we'll also discuss the differences between automated and autonomous solutions. Plus, we have a great guest, Sachin Gupta, Senior Vice President of Enterprise Networking at Cisco, to talk a little bit about intent. But before we go there and get into all that goodness, let's go ahead and jump into this week's blips. Now, even after the acquisition from Verizon and the Marissa Mayer error, Yahoo is still giving us trouble in email woes. Well, why? Well, because they're still one of the largest user bases when it comes to corporations and actually using Yahoo as their front end and back end for their email services. Now, this includes AOL branded email as well. In fact, my dad still uses an AOL email account. Why change it if it ain't broke, right? Well, it means that when it goes around, comes around, and it's a downstream effect on when anytime there's an issue with it, there's actually downstream effects for both groups of customers and businesses. Now, this past week, an infrastructure failure had just that effect. Now, starting at 11 p.m., Pacific time on Wednesday, email services were down until they started to resolve the issue around 6:30 a.m. the next morning. Now, it's unknown the number of email accounts worldwide that were affected, but it's known to have affected AOL, BT, Sky, TalkTalk, email services, and many more. Now, even though Yahoo has been a popular email platform, and especially free to consumers for over 2 decades, this might be the writing on the wall that it's time to move on.
Speaking of moving on, a new technique for storing passwords makes them 14 million times harder to crack. Researchers at Tide, a nonprofit based in Sydney, Australia, have developed an approach to protecting usernames and passwords that they claim is some 14 million times more difficult to hack than current mechanisms. Tide's method, called splintering, involves taking encrypted passwords within an authentication system, breaking them up into multiple tiny pieces, and storing the pieces on a decentralized distributed network from which they can be reassembled as needed. In tests conducted using 60 million LinkedIn passwords that previously had been breached, Tide engineers discovered that splintering passwords reduce the odds of a dictionary attack succeeding from 100% to 0.00072%, an improvement of over 14.1 million %. Now, within the Tide protocol, encrypted passwords are splintered and stored over 20 to 26 nodes on Tide's public blockchain. Tide's splintering approach is not available commercially yet, but organizations that want to kick the tires can find code and documentation for the technology where else but on GitHub, where it's available under a special Tide open source license.
Crimeware as a business model. An article in Dark Reading discusses a new report about Crimeware, and it takes a larger view of its evolution. In earlier episodes of Twilight, we've talked about reports covering the relatively lengthy dwell time that different kinds of malware may get in enterprise networks and the risks that are associated with that. We've also covered a story that described the VAR-like ecosystem that exists on the dark web between ransomware authors and those looking to lease their services. Well, this new report discusses how criminals have reacted to enterprises shifting their security concerns from financial cyber attacks to sophisticated threats by evolving a well-run crimeware organization that lets them develop, leverage, and distribute new infection methods. Brandon Levine, head of applied intelligence at Chronicle, the enterprise cybersecurity division under Alphabet, and the author of the report, states that, quote, once attackers are on a corporate network, they know how to conduct reconnaissance, see what's valuable to them, and where they sit in an organization, and they are able to select their victims for maximum value. Years of deploying massive and broad attacks have taught cyber criminals how to optimize for volume and speed. Far from the commodity threat model of old, where mainly individuals have been targeted, these businesses are offering a sophisticated level of services and analytics. And over the last 6 to 8 years, there's been a shift in these type of attacks. For example, while instances of banker malware was flat from 2013 to 17, it spiked more than 1,000% from Q2 2017. Ransomware has had a much more stable increase on a quarter-to-quarter basis up through 2018. And crypto miners, which were relatively rare until they broke out between 2017 and 2018, have been really on the rise. So as you can hear from the wording, we're even discussing this activity in enterprise business terms. So there's also been a shift to consolidate and to develop Crimeware as a service business models. This relies on a level of trust between affiliates as they manage malware distribution, command and control, data collection, and of course the payouts. By using an as-a-service platform, criminals eliminate the need to run their malware operations and can launch campaigns with less advanced skills. Levine notes that a lot of these businesses are run on trust, and many have been around for years. I guess there is honor among thieves after all.
Now, have you heard of SIM swapping? Well, it allows hackers to take control of your phone. In fact, this technique, which is actually becoming increasingly more prominent, has hijacked online personas of politicians and celebrities alike. Now, the victims, no matter how prominent or technically sophisticated they are, have been unable to protect themselves even after they've been hit again And again, now criminals have learned how to persuade mobile phone providers like T-Mobile and AT&T to switch a phone number to a new device that's under their control. Now, the number is switched from a tiny plastic SIM card or a subscriber identity module in the target's phone to a SIM card in another device. Now, sometimes hackers get phone numbers by calling a customer helpline for a phone carrier and pretending to be the intended victim. Now, in other recent incidents, hacking crews have paid off phone company employees to do the switches for them, often for as little as $100 for each phone number. Now, once the hackers gain control of the phone number, they can ask companies like Twitter or Google to send temporary location codes via text message to the victim's phone. In fact, Mo even mentioned before the show that it's infecting MFA as well. Now, the interesting part here is most major online services are willing to send those messages to help users who have lost their passwords. Now, the solution here that carriers have, well, carriers decided to add a special PIN to the account that would allow to unlock the phone and the ability to swap phones. Well, unfortunately, it has little to no effect on SIM swapping. Hackers can get the codes by bribing phone companies anyways. Now, phone company employees anyways. Now, targets have just been mostly online celebrities, but in fact, in 2016, SIM swapping gangs started to target cryptocurrency holders as well. Now, unlike traditional bank transactions, once virtual currency is moved to a new address, the transaction cannot be reversed. Now, American bank accounts have been less vulnerable to SIM swapping because banks will generally reverse any criminal transactions. But over the last year, law enforcement officials have arrested some of the gangs stealing cryptocurrency. And for the first time, a hacker was sent to jail and is serving a 10-year sentence. Now, in the recent weeks, the most prominent targets have been celebrities like Mr. Dorsey, the Twitter CEO, the actress Jessica Alba, and online personalities like Shane Dawson and Amanda Cerny, this is actually her second time. Now, the hackers used the accounts to post offensive messages to millions of followers. They also gained access to private communications. Now, it looks like SIM swapping is proliferating, and it's going to keep proliferating until carriers do something about it. It might be the next ransomware of the mobile realm.
Well, speaking of ransomware, hackers might have found the limits of ransomware attacks. Cyber extortionist ransom demands have surged in recent years as ransomware continues to cripple the operations of manufacturers, hospitals, and, most recently, local governments. Yet those demands may have hit an upper limit. On September 4th, Mayor John Mitchell of New Bedford, Massachusetts, announced that the town refused to pay a $5.3 million ransom demand to the operator that had infected municipal systems with a variant of RIAC. Instead, the city responded with a $400,000 counteroffer, which would have been paid from an insurance reimbursement. Well, the attacker refused, stalling the negotiation. Now, what had happened? In the early hours of July 5th, the attackers activated a variant of RIAC ransomware on the network through a combination of, as they called it, quote, luck, skill, and system architecture, end quote. The city's manager of information systems noticed odd behavior on the network and started taking down systems. The IT professionals responded quickly enough to limit the spread of RIAC to 158 systems. That's about 4% of New Bedford's total IT assets. When the ransom demand came, the mayor decided to negotiate. Attackers have not responded to these offers, and after the city's counteroffer was rejected, city officials are now working to restore the systems themselves. As of this moment, it's unknown how much has actually been recovered and restored, but we do know that nothing has been paid.
With great IoT power comes great responsibility. In an interesting dark reading article by a promising young reporter, it discusses a field-programmable gate arrays. FPGAs are the components that provide the processing power in many infrastructure and IoT devices. They come at the right price point while also being flexible, quick, and quickly defined. And they do single-purpose processing tasks like encoding a video stream on a camera, providing security functions that run before the applications launch on IoT devices, or calculate parameters for an application. Similar to other components designed to perform a specific task with high performance and reliability, like application-specific integrated circuits or ASICs, the key difference that has made them so popular is that FPGAs can be reprogrammed and updated. And as we all know, the key step to protecting a network is to keep it patched and updated. And of course, there's a catch. FPGAs are essentially a blank slate that can be redefined over and over again. And this capability provides opportunities for bad actors. FPGAs have become popular targets for researchers looking for vulnerabilities, and there's a growing catalog of vulnerabilities. Since these blank slates are sitting in so many of the devices that are increasingly everywhere in organizations, this is something security professionals really need to be aware of, and this was illustrated by the winner of this year's Pony Award for the most underhyped research, the researchers behind ThranGreCat. This is a vulnerability in certain Cisco routers that interrupted the boot process and allowed a hijacker to hijack the bit stream and disable protection mechanisms against boot time exploits. Many FPGAs can be partitioned among multiple users, and this leads to a potentially even scarier vulnerability because multiple vendors are affected. It's a side channel attack in which one user of an FPGA can spy on another by monitoring the small power fluctuations that occur during different operations on the chip. All this and more explain why I'm happy to have the dumbest house for 3 states.
Passwords. Now, everyone has a love-hate relationship with them. They are annoying. They're hard to remember. They can be stolen, but they also help secure our data and our livelihood. Now, we've actually seen workarounds to passwords using biometrics or multi-factor authentication and many more. However, passwords are evolving. Now, originally, complexity, uniqueness, and periodic change have been on the top best practices for passwords. But new recommendations have actually led to changes around password policies. Now, you already know users continue to choose weak or simple to guess passwords and reuse the same passwords on multiple services. This creates the very weak link in the password pipeline. Now, how can this be fixed? Well, some experts are asking more services to check passwords against weak usage lists, and also enforcing expiration policies. Now, is it enough to set complexity requirements or prevent people from using previously used passwords or require them to change periodically? Or maybe even check against a common list? Well, officially, kind of. Now, according to the National Institute of Standards and Technology, they say systems must check passwords against a list of known weak ones and disallow ones that were on a previous breach list or were also dictionary words or repetitive in nature and maybe even context specific, like the name of a service or a username. Now, the rest of the recommendations are really kind of common sense, but they are like the system should allow a copy and paste from a password manager functionality, or passwords should not be stored, only done so by salted hash, but also that the function to use to generate that salt should include a cost factor or something that would take a really long time to an attack. And finally, the system should permit the user to display a password as it's being entered rather than just asterisk or dots. Now, Microsoft has actually taken a different approach with AD password policies. They claim that the password expiration policy is actually no longer considered to have great value, and other measures like checking lists of banned passwords are actually more effective. In fact, have you been pwned? The site that contains lists major user ID and password breaches and allows you to check whether any of your logins have been compromised is becoming a great tool. The site has built and is maintained by Troy Hunt, a Microsoft regional director and a well-known security expert. Now, it has data on 369 sites and 7.8 billion breached accounts. Cool thing is it actually has an API that allows you to check if a particular password is in the breach point. And now you may be wondering, what is in some of the lessons here that leaders should take away from passwords if they still need to use them? Well, these might sound like common sense as well, but they should still be enforced, like stay up to date with recommendations for creating and maintaining secure passwords, minimize opportunities for the password failures, and finally, make sure to use those public, trusted databases of password failures and account breaches. If nothing else, long live the password. Well, folks, that does it for the blips. Next up, the bites. But before we get to that, we have to thank a really great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Command Line Heroes, the original podcast from Red Hat. Now, if you need a great podcast about people who are transforming tech and the world of programming languages, Command Line Heroes is it. Now, for the free software foundation, making a free, as in speech, version of the Bourne Shell was critical for their operating system. Enter Brian Fox. Now, Command Line Heroes is back for its 3rd season, and it's all about programming languages. From C to JavaScript to Ruby to Bash, the podcast dives into the origin stories of some of the most prominent languages around. Now, episode 6 dives into the origins and evolution of the born-again shell, aka Bash. Now, if you've used a Mac, or you actually relate to this very well, and even Bash Shell is on Windows 10 now. Now, historically, Bell Labs Bourne Shell was the default for Unix. Now, the Free Software Foundation, however, needed to create their own version for their not Unix operating system without using any of the Bourne source code. Want to hear more about the super interesting story? Well, Command Line Heroes is an original podcast from Red Hat, and it's all about the people who are transforming tech from the command line up. Now, to listen and to subscribe, head over to the podcast platform of your choice or visit redhat.com/heroes. That's redhat.com/heroes. And there you'll find full episodes as well, bonus content. And you can even test your skills on the Command Line Bash arcade game. redhat.com/heroes. And we thank Red Hat for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's now time for the bites, and this week we have a couple good stories here. This one's starting with ransomware. Now, Curtis already mentioned ransomware in his blip, and we already know that it's one of the most common cyber crimes in the world, although it's often casted as a foreign problem because hacks tend to originate from companies or countries such as Russia and Iran, and it's found that actually American industries have actually fostered its proliferation. Now, how can that be, right? Well, what is happening here? What's causing it? Well, ransomware insurance. Now, you might ask, well, why is that happening? Well, insurance deductibles are actually way cheaper than paying IT staff to actually try and recover any deleted backups or any backups of the data. In fact, it's on an average of only $10,000 as a deductible to pay and get that back. Now, I actually see a movie script coming along soon where the premise of it is an inside job of an IT staff where they basically ask for $500,000 paid out, only costing the city $10K to do it. Or even a rogue insurance company starts a spree of ransomware attacks to gain more business by using fear. But, who knows? That might come out as movies. But cyber insurance is actually sold by domestic and foreign companies, actually has grown an estimated $7 billion to $8 billion a year market in the U.S. alone. Now, between 2015 and 2017, total U.S. cyber premiums written by insurers that they reported to the National Association of Insurance Commissions doubled to an estimated of $3.1 billion. Now, to put this a little bit in perspective, just over the past year, unknown attackers using the Ryuk strain have besieged small governments and technology and logistics companies, demanding ransoms up to $5 million. Now, there is a bit of reverse psychology going on here because what the FBI is actually saying is that if you're paying out ransomware, actually contributes to the proliferation of more ransomware. Insurers' perspective is, well, paying out reduces our claim costs because their lost revenue and other expenses don't have to be paid. And in fact, rewarding hackers encourages them to do it more. Interesting, right? Well, it makes it so businesses and governments are actually frightened more, so they buy more policies. So it's more money. Now, the point of coverage here from the perspective of the underwriters from the industry is that the coverage is designed to mitigate losses and protect against future attacks, and that the victims just decide to pay whether they want to pay ransom or not. Now, it also means that the coverage is likely to include, in the event of attack, access to experts who will actually help repair the damage caused by the cyber attack and ensure any weaknesses in the company's cyber protection are eliminated. All right, I want to bring in my co-host because this is a very interesting story. It has a little bit of reverse psychology going on here, but it also is proliferating an industry or even in an economy that's based off of almost fear. Curtis, I want to throw this to you as first. Now, at some point, this model has to be kind of flipped on its head, right? Because hackers will start asking for more money that insurers won't be able to pay or can't even cover at scale, right? I mean, obviously right now it's been just a small amount, but sooner or later it's going to get larger and they're not going to be able to kind of bank on this model anymore, right?
Yeah, I think so. This is one of those classic models where, as with many crimes, if the folks who are hitting targets with ransomware were satisfied with $100, $1,000, even $10,000, in the case of companies or municipalities, people would probably just keep on paying it. But there is an economic principle called price elasticity. And in the same way that for a loaf of bread or a car or a night at the movies, there's an upper limit. There's a point at which people will start rebelling against that and using it less. There is a point at which companies, municipalities, individuals will stop paying the ransom because it is more cost effective to do something else. We had the case that I talked about of New Bedford, where they pushed back. I think we're going to see more of this. Now, again, if the amount of ransom is well within what both the attack victim and their insurance company think is reasonable, they may well just pay it. But, we saw something like this happen in the personal injury cases. There was a time when there was an amount, call it $50,000, where if you were hit by if a truck ran over your toe, or, if a truck came within 2 feet of your toe, you could yell, and the company and their insurance company would offer you, say, $50,000 just to go away, because that was cheaper for them than going to court, even if they won. But enough people began to take advantage of that many insurance companies now have a policy of taking every single claim to court. So I suspect we're going to see something like that at work as the cybersecurity insurance industry matures, and as the ransomware, call it a market, matures. We're going to see the big paydays coming down, and as we do, I think we will see more of these criminals turning to different opportunities.
Now, I want to throw this to Mo, because Mo, hackers are smart, and some of them are, right? I mean, they basically are going to know that, hey, some insurance companies are not going to pay this really the ransom amount of over X dollars, and so what they're going to do is they're going to start targeting the companies that are actually insured, and they're going to only ask for the amount that the company will cover, right? I mean, they're just going to start targeting the companies that have the insurance, won't they?
Well, that's one take on it. And yes, I'm going to agree with you. They're not dumb. They're also all about the low-hanging fruit, right? Because they're at the end of the day, they want to get paid, and they want to maximize the amount that they get paid. And we've already seen that they're picking their targets based on how to maximize that. In that this is explains the rise in the number of municipalities that have been targeted, because these are they're vulnerable in that they usually have lower education in terms of cybersecurity in their IT departments. In fact, a lot of times they outsource it. And also, whether they're insured or not, it's not their money, because if it's a municipality, they're going to be paying with our money, regardless. And this does seem to explain a lot of the rise with that. And again, it's all about maximization. So if you look at the Texas breach that happened, where depending on your news source, there were 22 or 23 municipalities that were hit simultaneously. The vector for that was not a 22 or 23 different breaches. It was a single outsourced managed service provider that was affected and managed to spread the. And they it looks like they're also doing. They're focusing the attack. They're in there just long enough that they own your system, and they own it up to the point where they are actually into the backups. So that you can't easily say, oh, I think I even pretty snarkily quipped once, haven't they ever heard of a disaster recovery plan? Well, it turns out it's easier for it to play one on TV than to actually do it. But they're getting in, staying in just long enough so that they can affect all of the backups, and then they trigger it. So that the likelihood of you just giving up and paying, whether you're using insurance or you're just using the taxpayers' money, that's their goal.
Right. Now, it's interesting. Cheever's actually lurking here in the chat room, and he mentioned, hey, this is actually making tape backups to become popular again. Now, Curtis, I want to throw this to you. Is this essentially fostering an economy of more backup companies, more services? Is actually helping them? Because now some companies, some organizations, they don't do that. And so now it's forcing them to go do it more securely and more broadly, right? Is this essentially getting more money to them?
Well, absolutely. And let's be really clear here. You don't need to talk about ransomware to have a lot of reasons to have a robust backup and recovery regime in place. And that's true whether you are part of the Fortune 500 or an individual. Back up and know that you can recover from those backups. It's critical. In this case, though, you're absolutely right. And we're seeing continuing development of advanced systems for tape backup. I did an article just a couple of weeks ago on an advancement in security, in encryption, and in protection from quantum decryption that's being developed by IBM, placed in the public domain, but first applied to tape backup systems, because these are critical long-term storage systems that are still in wide use at a whole host of companies. So I think we are going to see probably a new wave of interest in high-end, high-performance backup systems, because there's nothing better than that for making the ransomware criminals much less of an absolute threat.
Right. Well, before we move on to your bite, I do want to ask both of you, get your thoughts on this. Is if the idea is to minimize loss, what is the better solution here? Is it to enforce some regulation where maybe the insurance companies require a special cyber audit, maybe penetration testing, ensure that the networks are already not vulnerable, so when they're actually insuring them, they're less likely to get hit? What's the solution here? Maybe you guys have some ideas. Heather, I'll throw it to you first. What do you think?
I think that as much as I don't like to say anything in favor of an insurance company, because I usually take a dimmer view of that, if it's in their own best interest to make sure that they take in the payments from you without having to pay out to the bad guys. So if they can come in and help drive better behavior, better education, and ensure that that these municipalities and enterprises are better protected. Evolution says that the ransomware guys are either going to go someplace else or they're going to get better at their jobs. But it's a never-ending cycle. But if they can help focus that and get some better behavior on the municipalities and enterprise sides, then I have to say I'm all in on that.
Absolutely. All right, Curt, I'll throw it to you for your last thought. What do you think? What's a better model here? What can help? What's a possible solution to it?
Well, more than regulation, I think what we're going to start seeing is the insurance companies being much more aggressive in the same way that property insurance companies enforce health and safety requirements for the companies that they insure. They enforce all kinds of safety standards beyond what the regulations require if they're going to insure a company. I think we're going to see something similar in the case of the cyber world. The insurance companies are going to go in, do serious risk analysis, and then come back and tell the company what they're going to have to do and have to prove if they're going to have a policy.
We'll have to see, because that could actually have a slight backlash as well, where in fact insurance companies will now have to charge more. They have to do more due diligence. In fact, some companies might not be able to get up to their standards, which means then they just don't even have insurance, and now they're stuck with losing their data or paying it out from their own budget. So this should be interesting to see what happens in the coming years. Hopefully things will start to normalize, and like Heather said, they'll go find a different target. Well, let's go ahead and jump into the next bite. Curtis, I'll throw it over to you. We talk a little about the difference between automated solutions and autonomous solutions.
Well, no one can accuse us of being an industry that doesn't love its buzzwords. We use the buzzwords to describe all kinds of technologies marketed as tools that are going to make our lives, our jobs, easier and better. For describing security solutions, two words that are coming out fairly frequently are automated and autonomous. Now, they sound similar, but they have very, very different meanings. And confusion between the two can lead professionals to mistrust both of them and avoid using them even when they can provide tremendous value to the company. Let's take a look at what they mean. First, let's go to autonomous solutions. An autonomous system learns and adapts to dynamic environments and makes decisions or takes actions based on ever-changing data. Now, this is where you often see machine learning or artificial intelligence put into play so that these systems can learn from the data. The more data they ingest, the better they learn. In certain applications, these are already becoming more reliable and certainly faster than humans, and are going to be able to perform certain tasks at an efficiency level that just isn't possible with human beings sitting at the control. How about automated solutions? Well, automated systems run within a well-defined set of parameters, and they consistently execute the steps as they are defined. They're not learning, they're not changing, they're simply taking a look, analyzing the data that comes in, and applying that analysis to a known set of responses. What this does very well is give a defined set of responses very quickly and accurately, and eliminating, in most cases, the idea of human error. Now, many people are afraid of autonomous systems. You don't have to talk to people for a long time before you start hearing words like Skynet being thrown around. And the thing is, people worry that one of these systems is going to do what by definition it can do. When you talk to researchers and say, what's the difference between automated and autonomous? What's the difference, for example, between machine learning and artificial intelligence? They'll tell you that artificial intelligence, true artificial intelligence, includes the possibility of producing an outcome that surprises you. You know, when you've got something looking at, for example, malware signatures coming in, learning from it, and it spits out a response that, you know, Julie in accounts payable needs a ham sandwich in order to protect the system. That's entirely unexpected. Artificial intelligence can do that. An automated system cannot. The thing is, each of these have their best places to be deployed. Autonomous systems are great if the spectrum of scenarios is not known. If you're not working between the ditches, if you're working on rapidly changing, really dynamic scenarios, if there aren't predefined rules for how to respond, then AI or an autonomous system can help define those. Identifying 0 days might be a good way to use that in security. Now, how about automated systems? When you have highly predictable scenarios that are coming in at high speed and high volume, then an automated system can be best. You really don't want it going off and freelancing and learning. You want it simply applying known rules to known scenarios, giving you a known response as quickly and accurately as possible. So policy-driven tasks are great for automated solutions. Infrastructure, in many cases, lends itself to automation. Now, it's important to know that in automated solutions, the company deploying it has full control over their environment because their IT team is the one that set up the conditions and the rules. Both of these are really important. Both of these are going to make huge differences in the way we do things, and both need to be deployed in the right circumstances in order to see their full value being reached. So let me turn to my colleagues here. And Lou, I'm going to turn to you first. When you hear automated systems and autonomous system, which do you see being a part of most enterprise infrastructures within, say, the next 5 years?
I'm going to say both. I'm going to say that you can have autonomous systems that are reacting off events and issues that they detect, but they still need some kind of an automated workflow to be initiated when they need to react to those things. So I would say it's basically both of those things. I've seen them in the same case of, hey, there's a bunch of logs coming in from a node in your network, and those logs are being analyzed, and then using machine learning and AI determining, okay, this is probably the problem. Let me go reboot the network, or let me go reboot this server or this node, or let me go change a policy or security setting, and then initiating an automated workflow to do that work. So I would say it's probably going to be both, and the combination of both is going to really proliferate a better way of actually handling your systems, your services, and all of your endpoints. So I would say both of those areas.
Well, Mo, let me ask you this question. Are you seeing either or both of these being deployed in infrastructure scenarios already? And do you see one being deployed more than the other?
Well, certainly AI is is a big buzzword and is everywhere in every industry that I touch or come across. And for my Skynet overlords, I'm just would like to say that I'm looking forward to becoming an AI, and I would like to put in for the job of becoming a von Neumann probe, because I seriously want to explore the universe for the rest of eternity. But other than that, no, I think, and I really would like to see, I'm hoping one day there's going to be a company out there that does AI, and they're going to call themselves Synthesis, because that's exactly what you're talking about. You take information from column A and information from column B, and you come up with something you come up with ham sandwich. You come up with something that didn't exist before, and this is essentially the holy grail, especially in terms of data analytics, and that's another big buzzword.
Well, talking about these buzzwords, Lou, I know it's about time to get to the next part of the show, but I want to ask you, in wrapping up, when you look at these two technologies, how optimistic are you that they are going to be deployed effectively in the near term? Do you see signs that companies are putting them to the proper uses, or do you think we have a serious danger of running off the rails with one or both?
There's a bunch of solutions where there are AI solutions being offered amongst data streams that then again allow you to then go and perform actions on those alerts. And then you kind of have to go and build out these pipelines to go and handle those things. There are solutions out in this world today that offer both, where they don't already do the analytics and allow you to plug in workflows that then are initiated and drawn out to actually act upon. And I'd say the latter will be more successful, but some organizations it's not possible to do that. One, because of cost, and two, because of just the fact that they already have a set of workflows and maybe even automated systems. So I would say that success really lies in how much the organization wants to change and how much they want to pay in order to kind of get into this kind of environment and this way of doing things. And I think that's basically it. I think that's basically what's going to prevent them from being successful, is if they're not willing to spend the time and the money and the effort doing it. But we'll have to see. Thanks, Curtis. Well, folks, that does it for the Bites. But before we get to our guests, which is my favorite part of the show, we do have to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that is Worldwide Technology. Now, if you ever get a chance to visit the Worldwide Technology's Advanced Technology Center, you should go, because it's truly amazing site. They began building it 10 years ago, and it's grown exponentially. It really is like no other testing and research lab you've ever seen. Now, listen to what the lab actually contains. It has more than $500 million in equipment from hundreds of OEMs, like key partners ranging from heavyweights like Dell EMC, VMware, and Intel to emerging disruptors like Tanium, Equinix, and Expanse. Now, you want to work with an organization you can trust. Well, WWT is a trusted partner who stays with you over the years. Many of their customers have actually been with them for over a decade because they know WWT is where they can go to get the answers they need to make sure their business runs right. With all it has to offer, the ATC really is an incubator for IT innovation. Listen to what else it has to offer now. It has on-demand and schedulable labs like Dell EMC VX Rails, Extreme IO X2, and Isilon. Now, these labs represent the newest advances in primary storage, and there are hundreds of labs to explore, including multi-cloud, hyper-converged infrastructure, networking, secondary storage, data analytics, AI, and more. Now, you worked with on large products and projects before, right? Well, sometimes you want to try and build products before you know what the industry has to offer to help. Well, ATC can help you learn about products before you launch. Now, WWT's engineers use these environments to quickly spin up proof of concepts and pilots using the sandbox so customers can confidently select the best solution. Now, in many cases, this actually reduces the concept time from months to weeks, which actually increases your speed to market. They offer lab as a service. It's a dedicated lab space within the ATC. Here, customers can actually perform programmatic testing using their vast technology ecosystem that WWT already has built and offers. Now, it's virtual, so you can take advantage of it full-time, 24/7 worldwide. Now, the WWT engineers work in these labs every day, beta testing new equipment, building integrations, reference architectures to help their customers make the decisions and see results faster and in much less investment. Now, many have been eagerly awaiting, and the time is finally here. WWT has launched their new digital platform encompassing the ATC ecosystem. Now, this ecosystem creates a multiplier effect of knowledge, speed, and agility anytime, anywhere around the world for their customers. Now, get access to articles, case studies, hands-on labs, and other tools to make the difference in today's fast-paced world. To learn more about WWT, the ATC, and sign up for access to their new on-demand lab platform, go to wwt.com/twit and create an account today. WWT simplifies the complex. Now, that's wwt.com/twit. WWT, delivering business and technology outcomes around the world. And we thank Worldwide Technology for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it now brings us to my favorite part of the show. We get to bring in a guest to drop some knowledge on our Quiet Riot. And today we have Sachin Gupta, Senior Vice President, Product Management of Enterprise Networking with Cisco. Sachin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lou. How are you doing?
I'm doing fabulous. Now, our audience really loves to hear origin stories. Maybe you can take us through your journey through tech and how you actually ended up at Cisco Networking.
Great question. I actually started at Cisco 22 years ago and started straight out of college. And so did my undergraduate, did electrical engineering at Purdue University. I'm a Boilermaker, and then joined Cisco in customer support. Then went into technical marketing, so learned about software, networking technologies, worked with customers, and then moved into product management for Cisco enterprise infrastructure. So spent a whole bunch of my career on enterprise switching, but now I have the opportunity to run enterprise switching, enterprise wireless, enterprise routing, and SD-WAN, as well as the associated software with that infrastructure. So I run product management for that group.
Fantastic. Quite a journey. Now, we hear this term intent-based networking. Now, maybe you can just take us through what does it really mean for customers and for organizations?
I think, so quite simply, when you look at what's happening, there's more and more devices, things, users being connected. There's more and more applications that are in the cloud. And the complexity that IT has to deal with is exponentially growing. And at the same time, networking has been pretty much box by box. So, we talked a little bit earlier about automation and autonomous, right? It's really bringing those concepts to networking infrastructure. So what we talk about with intent-based is instead of doing CLI-based configuration on every element in the infrastructure, you can be at a policy layer, define what kind of access and experience different user groups or things need on the network, and it will get automatically provisioned into the entire infrastructure across routing, switching, and wireless for you. And at the same time, we'll collect the data and analytics to tell you if your intent was delivered correctly, if the security was delivered correctly, and if you're having any bad experience, how do you root cause, how do you troubleshoot, and then automatically go resolve the issue. So intent-based networking really moves you from just connectivity to productivity.
Fantastic. It sounds like there's a circular feedback loop there. Now, maybe you can give us a little bit of insight of why should people change? Why do they need to do anything, and why do they need this new model for the intent-based networking?
The old ways simply don't work, right? I mean, before, the world that you were deploying infrastructure for was quite static, right? So you could have desktops connected in, all your applications were in probably a private data center. It was a much simpler world. And now when you think about it, I mean, just look at some of the stats that we have. The Cisco Visual Networking Index shows that in 2022 alone, it's expected to have more traffic generated than in the first 32 years of the internet. And so the amount of traffic, the amount of devices and things that you're looking at that are connecting to the network, and the security threats that brings along with it is just unmanageable in a manual old world. You need to leverage the power of software-defined, the power of automation, the power of analytics. And so that's why this is not something that we're having to actively push. I mean, almost every customer says, tell me about how you can do policy-based segmentation. I want to make sure I can stop the proliferation of threats automatically. I keep my users and things segmented, and help me automate all of my infrastructure. I need to reduce the OpEx that I have to put in to go run this infrastructure and move my spend onto higher value services.
Now, I saw a piece of data that you actually showed recently that says that you're spending $3 on the network for every dollar you spend in infrastructure. And in fact, that globally $60 billion is being spent on network operations. And like you said, most of it's manual. Now, going to this kind of intent model, this base model, how much are you going to be saving? Is it going to be, you see a substantial amount of savings here, or are you still going to be spending a lot?
No, you will see a substantial amount of savings. And so, look, everyone's mileage varies on this. So we provide ROI calculators that help customers figure this out. But in our customer deployments, and we have many now production deployments, we have seen tremendous results. So we have seen things like 95% reduction in deployment time and what it takes to roll out the infrastructure with the policy that you need. We have seen over 50%, 75% reduction in breach impact. We've seen 75% improvement in troubleshooting time. And so again, depends on what the starting point is and how far you go with intent-based networking, but the benefits are remarkable. And so what customers tell us is, I've been trying very long to secure my network, segment my network in order to be able to stop ransomware, in order to be able to stop the proliferation of threats. And for that, I needed to figure out how I can identify everything that's connecting and go construct a business policy. And I really haven't had time to go think through all of those things and implement them because I didn't have a fundamental software-defined layer, which is what intent-based networking provides. So it now allows customers to really solve those problems because you're not talking to a single box at a time. You're talking to the entire network as a single system that can consume policy.
Right, makes sense. Now, what about, there are some big players in this the SD-WAN space today. Can you maybe take us through some of the unique features that kind of set Cisco apart here and how it kind of like funnels into the intent-based side of things?
Yeah, so look, I'm focused on intent-based networking as it applies to access. So think wired, wireless access of any users and things into a network. And also for intent-based networking as it applies to the WAN, so software-defined WAN, for example. But now Cisco is unique because we're applying this across multiple domains. Now, if you think about what any customer actually is looking for, right? Customers are looking for users and devices connecting to applications and data in a secure way with the best experience. And now that requires you to be at the intersection of users, devices, application data, which is where Cisco is. We can take you from access through the WAN to the cloud with security, with data center, and apply intent-based networking across the board. So for example, if I need to have doctors having access to medical records, patients having access to the internet, and IoT devices having access to administration servers, I can apply that policy end to end, and only Cisco can actually do that because we have a leading position in every one of those domains, and we integrate all of those through policy models end to end. And so I can talk to you about every domain and how we differentiate, but I think this whole notion of what outcome customers are looking for and the fact that you actually have to cut across all these domains is only something Cisco can do.
Makes sense. I do want to bring my co-hosts in because they've had tons of questions here. Curt, I want to throw it to you first about your question about the kind of the size of the network.
Okay, I've been reading and talking to Cisco folks about intent-based networking for a while, and one of the questions I have as it progresses, is this something that is only of interest to, say, companies with 10,000 plus node networks, or is this starting to filter down to smaller networks as well? I know software-defined networking certainly started out being something that, frankly, only the carrier-based networks could take advantage of, and now it's coming down. Is the same thing happening here?
So I think, look, every customer is dealing with the complexity of everything mobile, more and more things connecting, more IoT, more things moving to the cloud. So how do you think about policy? How do you think about security? Every customer is dealing with that. And so I don't think this is now only for very large customers. In fact, we have deployments with customers who may have 500 users, who may have 1,000 users, and all the way up to 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 clients. And so we're seeing deployments of all sizes. This is a problem. I mean, the complexity of addressing those trends it applies to everybody. Everybody is looking for an automation solution, something that has rich analytics and provides or starts to close that loop as we go forward.
Curtis, you're muted. Bug that,
Thanks.
guys. All right.
And three, two. I want to follow up with that. When you're talking about the automation and the need for networks of all size to be automated, what do you see as really the big drivers of that automation? Is it that the application delivery aspects of the networks are becoming that much more complex? Is it the security aspect? What's really driving this complexity that we're seeing? That then itself drives more automation in the network?
That's a great question, Curtis. And actually, I think you answered it in the question. Security and application experience are the two biggest drivers. Because remember now, instead of having a desktop that's plugged in, right? It's static, it sits in one place, and you can apply a security policy to it. You now have laptops, you have watches, you have building management systems, you have medical devices, all kinds of things that are connecting into the network that are mobile. And you now need to dynamically classify what they are. You need to apply a policy regardless of where they connect from. So if I move from one building to the other, how does it recognize that I'm still an engineer and I have these access rights? So not only do you have users and things moving, so the world on the access side is very dynamic, you also have applications that are now in multiple clouds. So you now have to manage a security relationship and deliver an application experience where both sides of the equation, the users and devices and the applications and data, are mobile. It's a fundamentally new world.
Thank you. So I do want to transition a little bit because Cisco has some great announcements here. We do want to hear a little bit about what they have to offer, especially since we hear about the advent of Wi-Fi 6 and 5G. Maybe you can kind of take us through some of the latest announcements and some of the new releases that Cisco is coming out with here.
Yeah, look, Wi-Fi 6 is incredible. I mean, Wi-Fi in general is just amazing technology. It's probably the most ubiquitous, most standardized technology in the world. We all rely on it every day. And that example I gave you about the Cisco Visual Networking Index, it still predicts that in 2022, just over half, 51% of global traffic will be over Wi-Fi. And so it is a technology that is so critical today and will be continuing to be increasingly critical going forward. Now, with the new standard Wi-Fi 6, besides making the name simpler, we had A, B, G, N, and then we were going to call it 11AX, but now we're calling it Wi-Fi 6. So besides calling it something simpler, it now delivers higher capacity. So over the same spectrum, getting better capacity, better range, better reliability, improved latency, up to half the latency, and one other thing, which is improved battery life, which becomes, I think, particularly interesting for those smaller IoT devices that may not have large batteries, actually connecting into the infrastructure and then maintaining that connectivity because of the improved battery life. So Wi-Fi 6, first of all, lots of obviously great new advantages, but also fully backwards compatible. And so a customer can move to Wi-Fi 6, continue to support the older clients that could be running 802.11a and AC, doesn't matter, in this new environment. And as new clients come on board, getting all the significant benefits of Wi-Fi 6. We also have clients available today. So this is not a future technology. Cisco has worked with Samsung. The S10 supports Wi-Fi 6. We've already done interoperability with Cisco infrastructure. So these are benefits customers can start getting today.
So I want to actually throw it to our Wi-Fi expert in-house here. Mo, I want to throw this to you because you've done a lot of installs. You've done a lot of work with companies and solutions here. Are you starting to see organizations looking for Wi-Fi 6? Are they implementing it? Are they looking for it? Is something they need?
Well, I know that everybody's always looking for the newest and latest and greatest. It depends on the customer base, right? If they're a customer who is deploying now and they are not the kind that updates, more than every 5 years, then this is absolutely something that they should be looking at. Especially now as we head into the bright new future. One of the things that I'm really intrigued about with Wi-Fi 6 that I want to ask our guest about is the incorporation of WPA3. You've mentioned a lot about security and the amount of traffic that's going to be generated, and in particular the benefits that Wi-Fi 6 brings to IoT devices potentially. How do you, since WPA3 is mandatory with Wi-Fi 6, how do you see this improving things, especially with the IoT devices? And are you at all concerned with the Dragonblood vulnerability that was announced earlier this year?
So I'm not an expert on the Dragonblood vulnerability, so I'm going to stay away from that. But on the WPA3 side, Mo, you probably understand this better than I do, but the security benefits that provides for even personal networks or enterprise networks are going to be tremendous. And yes, with newer Wi-Fi 6 clients, you get the benefit of WPA3, but you also have backward compatibility for older clients that may not support it. And maybe, look, while I don't understand about the specific vulnerability you mentioned, I will say this, though, that it's not just the security capability of Wi-Fi 6 that is important. That's absolutely a critical component in the overall security architecture. But as we work with customers, the requirement is help me also securely identify the IoT thing that's connecting, because a lot of them don't have good .1x stacks that are reliable that we can use to detect what this is. And so we need to use other profiling methods, other ML-based technology, for example, to recognize what it is securely and onboard it with the right privilege on the network. And then we need to make sure that, hey, if this is an infusion pump versus some sort of other medical device or a surveillance camera or something, we can actually securely detect those and separate their access into different segmented groups inside the network. And that's, as part of intent-based networking, we look at what the standard provides, which is obviously something like WPA3 as part of Wi-Fi 6, but try to take it well beyond that in order to provide a complete solution for the customer.
Okay, so I have a follow-up question, because earlier you mentioned one of the benefits especially for all the IoT devices, is the target wake-up time, which is going to improve battery life, especially for these small coin-operated coin battery devices. It's a requirement on the AP side, but it's optional on the client side. Do you see that as a problem for adoption going forward? And not to put you on the spot, but are we being maybe a little too wishy-washy, or is the WFA being a little too wishy-washy in letting for certification so many things be optional on the client side?
I think, first of all, this is always a problem in terms of adoption when you make things optional. It's not required as part of the standard. And Mo, I know you've probably been doing this a long time. So you've seen even things like Hotspot 2.0, right, which became standardized and could significantly improve roaming experience that just most clients didn't adopt and nobody really adopted. And so didn't quite go anywhere. And so what we found in Cisco is we have to act as a leader. In order to get some of these optional capabilities that are defined in a standard way, but are not perhaps adopted by everybody, we need to make it easier, and we need to be sort of strong advocates in the industry to get these adopted so that customers can realize the full benefit. And so I do think for that improved battery life, some of those optional elements, we will need to work with ecosystem players to go make that happen. And so, we worked with, again, I'll talk about Samsung, but we worked with several venue players that are out there to create something called open roaming, which basically takes the Hotspot 2.0 fundamentals, but creates a framework and a consortium so that more and more vendors and more venues become part of it, and customers can get the benefit of seamless onboarding and roaming. We're going to have to do, I think, something similar from the battery life savings potential of Wi-Fi 6. We had to do the same thing with power over Ethernet, right? Just more and more endpoints that could use power over Ethernet. Similarly, we're going to have to work with more and more partners and develop that ecosystem to get the battery life savings.
Okay, so I just have one more question. I really am not trying to zing you or anything, but of all of the benefits from for Wi-Fi 6, optional or mandatory, what's the one that you think we're going to, as an industry, we're just going to love the most and see the most benefits from?
Ooh.
Pick a favorite.
Okay, you know what? I don't know, maybe it sounds like a little bit of a cop-out, but I'm going to go for the easy one. I actually think the capacity that Wi-Fi 6 creates, right? A lot of the conversations I have with customers isn't necessarily that, I need gigabit to my client, right? I mean, the hundreds of megabits that they were already able to get, they're quite happy with. The problem was that the density of clients that they have that are connecting, they couldn't really support that density with previous standards. And so the capacity that Wi-Fi 6 creates with the new OFDMA technology, the new other parts of the standard, the fact that I can now have sort of like ultra high density of clients and then still have good bandwidth, a much more deterministic experience for these clients, I think is the biggest driver. I think it allows wireless to truly be primary access for almost any kind of deployment. And it opens up new opportunities, 4K, 8K video, even with the lower latency, looking at AR, VR type of scenarios, we're going to see so many new things become possible, new applications become possible because of that significantly increased capacity. And that's with the existing spectrum. As potentially more spectrum becomes available, I think you're going to see a lot more things that Wi-Fi 6 does.
And I think that's an excellent answer, actually. You did very well with that. I think you're right about the capacity and the density. And what you're really talking about is the difference between OFDM and OFDMA. And the analogy that I've always liked to use with that is with all the, not going down into the weeds with all the subcarriers and everything, but with OFDM, it's like you could take the bucket and you could fill it with a bunch of irregularly shaped stones and the bucket is full. But with OFDMA, we now get to drizzle in, small pebbles in amongst that and maybe sand and then water. And then now the bucket is just as full, but we've been more efficient, or it's still full, but we've been more efficient and been able to carry more clients and more data.
So Mo, I hope that's not copyrighted because I'm going to use that.
It absolutely is now.
All right, I'm going to have to make my own. But I think, that analogy you gave is so perfect because it's same spectrum, higher capacity or better usage of that, so you get more out of it. And that, I think, that's what's needed in this world. I look at myself and how many clients that I'm bringing onto the network now versus what I did 5 years ago. Personally, it's crazy. And so we're just going to see this exponentially continue to grow.
Fantastic. Sachin, we're running a little bit low on time. Thank you so much for being here. But I did want to give you a chance. I know there's a lot of announcements coming out. There's a lot of new products. Maybe you can tell the folks at home where they can go, where they can get started, how they can find out new solutions for their organization. Where can they start?
So look, I would start with Cisco.com. Our partners are great. I know we talked about Worldwide Tech. They're a great Cisco partner. And go to Cisco.com, look at intent-based networking, look at Wi-Fi 6. We just announced the unplugged and uninterrupted experience that Cisco can deliver just a few months ago. Look at the AI, ML, analytics capabilities, the automated software-defined access, software-defined WAN capabilities. All of that you should be able to find at Cisco.com. And feel free to reach out to the communities there or through your Cisco account reps, and we're happy to help.
Fantastic. Well, folks, you've done it again. You sat through another hour of the best dang enterprise podcast in the universe, according to 9 out of 10 automated autonomous systems. But I want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to my co-host in crime, starting with our in-studio co-host, Heather Williams. Heather, thank you so much for being in studio. Can you maybe tell the folks at home where they can find you, all of your work, and all of the stuff you're doing soon?
Well, if you can catch up with me, I'm in various places. Mostly I'm hanging out in the little log cabin in East Texas. But I'll be headed to D.C. shortly to support the Black Hat trainings. If I don't get diverted by way to some of the states that got hit by the hurricanes. So thanks to all of the IT volunteers that volunteer with ITDRC, including a great group of guys from Microsoft that I hooked up with earlier this week. Oh, and I have a door prize for Sachin, our guest today. I didn't know if you had your own 11AX access points, so I brought one here for you, the R750. I'll get it in the mail to you.
I'm well covered with my Cisco AP, but thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys. Well, of course, we have to thank our other co-host in crime, our very own Mr. Curtis Franklin. Curtis, can you tell the folks at home where they can find you, all of your work, and what you're writing next?
Well, you can find me, as always, over at darkreading.com, specifically in the Edge section most of the time. Let's see, what am I working on now? I've got an article coming up on times when a VPN might, well, not be the overall solution that you thought it should be. Sometimes VPNs can help the bad guys tunnel in as well. Also working on pieces on security around messaging system. You know, how do you take the lessons you learn from making email secure and apply it to things like WhatsApp? So that's all coming up. Got some exciting stuff happening, and hope you'll see it over at Dark Reading. Find pointers to all that at my Twitter account. That's at KG4GWA.
Thanks, Curtis. Well, we also have to thank you as well. You're the person who drops in each and every week to watch and to listen to our show, get your enterprise goodness. And we want to make it easy for you to watch and listen to the show and catch up on your enterprise news for that week. Go to the show page right now, twit.tv/Twight. There you'll find all the information about our back episodes, plus all the show notes, co-host information, guest information, all the links to the stories that we do in the show. But more importantly, next to those videos, you'll get those helpful download and subscribe links. In fact, there's links to all your favorite podcast apps there, both Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Go ahead and subscribe, because that's how you keep us continuing to do this show. It's how you support us, as well as that's how you get your enterprise news for the week. So go ahead and subscribe, share it with your family, friends, coworkers, and we hope that we can continue to do this show by you assisting. Now, after we subscribe, go ahead and remember we do the show live each and every week right now, 1:30 p.m. Pacific time. You can join us live at live.twit.tv. And of course, if you're going to watch the show live, you might as well jump into the chat room live as well. We have a chat room. Great characters in there. They're always helping us direct the show, asking great questions, starting discussions. So go ahead and jump in the chat room live at irc.twit.tv. Now, of course, don't forget you can follow me at twitter.com/LouMM. There you can find all of the stuff that I post about projects, things that I do during the week at my day job here at Microsoft. And of course, you can also check out Microsoft's stuff on dev.office.com, where we post all of our latest and greatest ways to customize your office and productivity suites and to make it more productivity for you and your organization. Now, I also want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to Leo and Lisa. They continue to support us each and every week to do this Enterprise Tech Show, and we can't do this show without them. We also want to thank all the engineers at Twit, and of course our loyal producer as well, our tireless producer, Mr. Brian Cheebert. He does all the bookings and plannings for the show. We really couldn't do this show without him. Now, before I sign out, we have to thank our TD for today. It's both Jeff and Victor. I think they're both there, maybe?
Yeah, we're both here.
Yeah, we're both here.
Both here? Okay, we have to continue the tradition. We did it last week when Padre was there. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what the show was about today. What was the theme?
It has something to do with buckets, but that's copyrighted now because Heather's copywriting it. So, but I found out that the bucket analogy works for everything, right? So I'm going to start using it for everything.
Maybe.
If Heather doesn't copyright it.
But I would say probably not. I think that the actual theme was automated autonomous solutions, but we'll have to maybe next time
you can put those in
ask you a
buckets
little easier
too.
question. Yeah. Okay. Maybe next time. Well, until next time, I'm Louis Maresca, just reminding you, if you want to know what's going on in the enterprise, just keep quiet.